The closing of AnandTech is a huge moment in my life. I went into electrical and computer engineering specifically because of reading AnandTech. There was no other site that could so clearly explain the magic of how computers actually worked, like AnandTech. Hugely complicated topics at about half my engineering degree were all discussed on AnandTech, and I loved reading every minute of it. Release day of new processors were just as impactful as Christmas to me, filling my head with ideas and possibilities of what the future might hold and how it actually works in the present day. I wouldn't have my job without AnandTech. I wouldn't live where I do without AnandTech. My entire life, as it currently stands, has a clear line between where it is today and that website. It's clearly not a bright day with the closing of AnandTech, but I see a lot of the same magic and passion from the DF team, which is partly why I'm a Patreon member. I want to help ensure your future so I can see how the latest and greatest tech works and what the future holds for all this technology. If someone cares about making journalism like this last for years to come, please help support DF on Patreon. I hope you guys could really dig into more technical and specific topics with your PC benchmark suite to help educate the audience and developers themselves. Hopefully your passion for the work you do shines through your content and encourages another generation of engineering talent from your work. Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about the second part of that shortly, but Oliver, you posted on Twitter that you were dismayed about the closure of AnandTech. I'm really interested in your take on it.
Yeah, I mean, going back is almost as far as I can remember, at least to 2007 or 2008, I started reading AnandTech, and I mean, I really prioritized reading it over other publications that covered similar topics because of the level of detail they would go into and the understanding they displayed, especially when, like, you know, back in the day when Anand was running the ship up until 2014 when I believe he left. And I mean, even subsequently under Ryan Smith, I mean, they've just been doing a tremendous job covering new architectures, new products. I mean, I especially enjoyed their analysis of new Apple products and of new CPU architectures. It's just such a shame they're gone. I mean, I honestly don't know, because it just feels like it's leaving such a hole in the computer analysis space. I don't know exactly what will replace them. I mean, Ian Cuttress has a YouTube channel, AnandTech journalist there. He has a YouTube channel and he has a new website and stuff like that. And that could certainly cover some of the gap, but I just don't really know of any other publication in terms of really in-depth hardware analysis and coverage of specifically microarchitectural features and things like this. I think it's just a gap that might persist for a little bit. But yeah, I mean, my go-to whenever there would be a new product launch would always be AnandTech. Whenever a new iPhone would be announced, I'd always trust that AnandTech would have a good seat of the pants kind of impression of exactly, okay, what process nodes are they using? What new technological aspects this product should we think are interesting? You know, and I just think that they're just so steeped in the hardware world and they had so much understanding and their journalists did such a terrific job. And it's such I think a great failure of the model of tech journalism that a site like AnandTech, you know, I presume was not profitable enough or profitable period to survive, because that seems like a pretty lean outfit. They did tremendous work. They did really stellar, one-of-a-kind work in some respects on covering new CPU architectures and things like that. So I don't know. I think it's really unfortunate. I hope all those guys land on their feet. I hope that there is some kind of new site or addendum to an existing site or existing publication that will encompass some of that work so that I can continue to get that level of quality that really I think only AnandTech was able to consistently provide in some of those subject areas.
Yeah. Did you have much of a view on this, John? Because it's not really your primary.
Oh no, I've long read AnandTech stuff, more so in the past than these days, I guess. But maybe that's part of the problem. But yeah, they're extremely meticulous takes on hardware is something that I don't think anybody else is really doing at this level. And it's like there's so much information that has come from AnandTech dating back decades. This is a gigantic loss for us, and they did not specify specifically, I guess, why it shut down. I guess we can assume that Future Publishing decided to close them down. Is that fair
there was
to say?
a video from Ian Cuttress which basically went into a lot of depth about stuff that wasn't covered in the exit statement. But it was essentially that from what I can tell, it's at least from Ian's comments, was that it wasn't really a great fit for the, they found it difficult to slot into the future hierarchy. And there wasn't really much sort of innovation and change over the years. So the AnandTech that sadly left us last week wasn't really fundamentally changed from many years ago.
True.
It was
Still.
finding it different, and obviously the amount of content that was being posted was becoming sparser and more thin on the ground as well.
Mm-hmm.
There seemed to be a lot of issues there, but carry on.
No, I mean, yeah, that's kind of gets to my concern though about like the survivability of traditional websites like this. Like this, the fact that this had not evolved is one of the reasons I think it was so good, because in many ways, I would argue websites have become worse in the last like 5 years. They've become so optimized for the smartphone experience and just these giant lists of endless content that's just you're just supposed to keep going through, right? And it's just the logic and like just the feel of using it is kind of gone. It's not what I like anymore, which is why I've largely moved away from most of those sort of modernized websites. I just don't feel like the design is conducive to a good reading experience, and AnandTech kept that. And I'm sad that that's not a viable model, because they were a big name in this space. And it also makes me kind of resent Future. I have to say, like that they couldn't find a solution to this. It just I don't know. It has that typical short-sighted corporate nonsense that we're also sick of, like kind of like emanating from the background. You know what I mean? And it sucks.
Well, I think the route forward would have been full independence and Patreon, frankly, because the reason it's not in existence anymore is because they couldn't make a business model work for it, and ultimately, people need to be paid.
And maybe the running costs, maybe the salaries, the number of people working on it, maybe that was all just too high. I don't know. Yeah. And I don't know, man. I really don't know. I never hear people say positive things about Future necessarily. So I don't know. This just sort of adds to the bucket of mess that they've continued to make over the years.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, what can I say? I mean, I think we first started to actually take PC a lot more seriously on Digital Foundry in 2012. Yeah, I think the first sort of editor's day I went to was GTX 680, which would have been March 2012, if memory serves correctly. And, ultimately, it was early days, and you would look to the greats to see how this sort of reviewing stuff is done. First order of business would always be to go to AnandTech, right? Because they were kind of like the definitive word on hardware performance. And, from there you start to learn. There were some things in there which in AnandTech which did always sort of strike me as rather odd. For example, their CPU reviews, the gaming benchmarks would always be virtually the same for every processor, which, just highlights that it's probably a GPU that you're effectively testing then. But ultimately, the methodologies improved. How can I say this? AnandTech was the start point, right, for pretty much everyone in the industry, as far as I was aware at that time. And to see them sort of diminished over the years has been sort of troubling, and to see them gone is really disappointing. What can I say? I honestly think that, Ryan Smith and what remains of his team should possibly consider starting their own thing and consider Patreon as the way to do it. I think that there's enough goodwill in the world for that particular brand to see it brought back. And I hope that does happen, or something like it. It's really disappointing to see the staff were like, okay, effectively appealing for jobs on Twitter in the wake of the closure. It's kind of like worst case scenario, really. Going back to some guy person's comments here about Digital Foundry, and this is exactly why we have our Patreon, because let's just say that we're not a commercially minded enterprise, not by design, but just the way things have kind of worked out over the years. And it basically means that we are reliant on support via Patreon to actually have a viable business. which is kind of scary, but at the same time, liberating in a way, because it means we don't need to do a lot of the stuff that other people are doing. In terms of our plans for PC, which some guy person's alluding to here, yeah, we're looking to revamp the way we do benchmarks. We're looking to revamp the way we do reviews. And I think that's possibly one thing that you kind of have to take into account when you're running a tech-based website, which is that the pace of technological change in this market is astonishing, and you have to keep up with it. I don't think we have kept up with it fully. I think we've made some big strides. I think we've embraced the fact that features are actually really important in terms of PC gaming. The state of the art isn't just about silicon anymore, but we do have to up our game in terms of, stuff like benchmarking and whatnot, and to get back to doing CPU reviews on video, which we haven't done for a while now, because I've always felt slightly disconnected from the whole CPU reviewing process. I don't think it, looking at those various bar charts that appear, they don't actually reflect the importance of the CPU in gaming and how it actually is manifesting in actual gameplay. That's something we need to work on. But yes, ultimately it's about recognizing that you've got to adapt, you've got to change. I mean, I've been in this business for like 34 years now, and that's the reason I'm still in it. You've got to evolve, you've got to do better, and I think it's unfortunate that AnandTech wasn't given the resources to do that. I do wish the team well. I do hope that they consider their importance and their authority, and the fact that there is a lot of people out there, myself included, that would support them directly in any venture that they
absolutely
choose to go to consider.